I walked into my parents' living room, and my entire world stopped. My father had Emma by the arm, and he was hitting her with a belt across her back and legs. My 7-year-old daughter was screaming, tears streaming down her face. I lunged forward, every instinct in my body screaming to protect my child. But my mother grabbed my left arm, and my sister seized my right, their grips like iron. They held me back, forced me to stand there and watch as my father struck Emma 3 more times. I was screaming, struggling, completely helpless. The moment my mother and sister loosened their grip, I tore away from them and rushed to Emma. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I could feel the welts rising on her back through her thin shirt. "What is wrong with you?" I shouted at my father, scooping Emma up. She wrapped her arms around my neck and buried her face in my shoulder. My father stood there, belt still in his hand, his face red with anger. "That child needs discipline. She was being disrespectful. She's 7 years old." My voice cracked. "You don't hit children." My mother stepped between us. "Brooke, calm down. You're overreacting. A little discipline never hurt anyone. Your father raised you just fine." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. My sister Linda crossed her arms and nodded in agreement. "Emma needs structure, Brooke. Maybe if you provided it, Dad wouldn't have to step in." I didn't waste another second arguing with them. I carried Emma out to my car, her sobs gradually quieting to hiccups against my neck. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. "Daddy, it hurts," Emma whispered. "I know, sweetheart. I know. We're going to make it better, okay? I promise." I drove straight to the police station, my mind racing. This was assault. Child abuse. My own father had beaten my daughter, while my mother and sister physically restrained me. The fury burning in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt. At the station, a young officer named Davis took us to a private room. He was kind, patient. He took photos of the red welts across Emma's back and legs, documented everything carefully. Emma told him what happened in a small, scared voice. She said Grandpa Gerald got mad because she accidentally spilled juice on his newspaper. That's why he hit her. For spilling juice, I gave my statement, describing exactly what I'd witnessed. Officer Davis seemed genuinely sympathetic. He said they'd open an investigation, gave me a case number, and told me I'd done the right thing by coming in immediately. Next, I drove to the emergency room. The doctor who examined Emma was a woman in her 40s with gentle hands. She asked Emma questions while she looked at the injuries. And Emma answered honestly. Yes, Grandpa hit her. Yes, it was with a belt. Yes, Grandma and Aunt Linda held Daddy back. The doctor stepped out with me afterward. I'm filing a mandatory report with Child Protective Services, she said quietly. These marks are consistent with what your daughter described. You did the right thing bringing her in. For the first time since walking into that living room, I felt like maybe things would be okay. The system was working. There was documentation, evidence, official reports. My father would face consequences. That evening, Emma fell asleep early, exhausted from crying. I sat in my small apartment living room, still shaking with residual adrenaline. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Officer Davis. "Mr. Brooke, I wanted to update you on the investigation." "Thank you. What happens next?" There was a pause. "Well, we interviewed your father, mother, and sister this afternoon." "Good. So you arrested him?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Brooke, all 3 of them deny that the incident happened the way you described it." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They claim you arrived at the house intoxicated and became aggressive with your father. They say they had to restrain you to prevent a physical altercation, and in the struggle, you grabbed your daughter roughly, which is how she got the marks. They're stating that you're fabricating this story because you're bitter about your recent divorce, and you're trying to alienate your daughter from her grandparents." I couldn't breathe. That's a complete lie. I wasn't drunk. I didn't hurt Emma. They're covering for what he did. They also showed me text message exchanges between your sister and your ex-wife. According to these messages, you've had ongoing issues with anger and alcohol use. That's not true. Amanda and I divorced, but it was amicable. We don't have those kinds of problems. Officer Davis's tone had changed completely from our earlier conversation. Now he sounded skeptical, careful. Mr. Brooke, I have to tell you that making false reports is a serious offense. And if you did injure your daughter, even accidentally, that's child endangerment. I didn't hurt my daughter. My father beat her with a belt. We'll continue investigating, but right now, it's your word against 3 other adults. I'd suggest you be very careful about any further allegations. He hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, feeling like the floor had just opened beneath me. How had this happened? I'd gone to the police for help, and now I was the one being accused? The next morning, someone knocked on my apartment door at 7:30. I opened it to find a courier holding an envelope. The moment I saw the return address from a law firm, dread settled in my stomach. I tore it open, legal papers. My mother, Patricia, had filed for emergency grandparent custody of Emma. The petition claimed I was mentally unstable, potentially abusive, and that Emma was in imminent danger in my care. There was a court date scheduled for 5 days from now. I called in sick to work and spent the morning calling every lawyer in the phone book. Most wanted retainers of $5,000 or more, money I absolutely didn't have. The divorce had drained my savings. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, I reached an attorney named Scott Jennings, who said he'd take my case on a payment plan. We met at his office that evening. Scott was in his mid-50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too many ugly custody battles. He spread the papers out on his desk and reviewed them while I sat there, trying not to fall apart. "This is serious," he said finally. 3 family members are all telling the same story. That carries weight with judges. But Emma told the hospital staff what really happened. The doctor filed a report. Children's testimony is tricky, especially at her age. Defense will argue she's been coached or is confused about what happened during a chaotic situation. He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about your ex-wife. How's your relationship with her?" I rubbed my face. "We divorced 8 months ago. The marriage just fell apart. We had money problems, disagreed about parenting stuff. But we worked it out. We share custody, 50-50. It's been fine. Any bad blood? Her family ever have issues with you? Her parents never thought I was good enough for her. I work as a logistics coordinator at a warehouse. They wanted her to marry someone more successful, I guess. But Amanda never cared about that stuff. You need to call her. Get her on your side. If your ex-wife testifies that you're a stable parent and would never hurt Emma, that helps tremendously." I'd been avoiding calling Amanda because I didn't know how to explain this nightmare. But Scott was right. I needed her support. That night, after Emma was asleep, I called Amanda. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. "Amanda, it's me. Something terrible happened. I really need to talk to you. Please call me back." I left 3 more messages over the next hour. She didn't call back. The next day, I tried to prepare Emma as gently as possible. We sat on the couch together, and I explained that she might need to talk to a judge about what happened at Grandpa's house. "Do I have to see Grandpa again?" Her voice was so small. "No, baby. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, I promise. I don't like Grandpa anymore. He's mean." I pulled her close, fighting back tears. "I know. I'm so sorry this happened." My phone rang. "Finally, Amanda." I stepped into the kitchen to answer. "Amanda, thank God. I've been trying to reach you." "I know. I got your messages." Her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Did my mom or Linda call you?" "Yes. They told me what happened." Relief flooded through me. "Then you know what my father did to Emma. I need you to testify that I would never hurt her, that I'm a good father." Silence on the other end. Then, Brooke, they told me their version of what happened. And honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore. My blood went cold. "What?" "Patricia and Linda have been calling me for the past 2 days. They're worried about you. They said you've been under a lot of stress, that you might be having some kind of breakdown. They think you might have accidentally hurt Emma, and now you're blaming your father to cover it up. Amanda, no. That's not what happened at all. I saw my father beating Emma with a belt. I tried to stop him, and my mother and sister held me back. They showed me text messages, Brooke. Messages between Linda and me from months ago, where I talked about your temper, about how you get when you're stressed. I don't have a temper. We argued sometimes during the divorce, but I never hurt anyone. My mom always said you had anger issues. I defended you, but maybe she was right. Your mom never liked me, because I'm not rich enough for her daughter. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. That anger. I was gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. I'm angry because my father beat our daughter, and now everyone is lying about it. You know me, Amanda. You know I would never hurt Emma. I thought I knew you. But people change. Stress does things to people. Her voice was shaking now. I'm filing to modify our custody arrangement. Emma needs stability right now, and I can provide that. You'll have supervised visitation until you get help. Amanda, please, don't do this. I have to protect our daughter, Brooke, just like you should have been doing. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone, feeling like my entire world was collapsing. My own father had beaten my child. My family was lying about it. The police suspected me instead. And now my ex-wife, the mother of my child, thought I was the abuser. Emma appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. Daddy, why are you crying? I wiped my eyes quickly. I'm okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. But I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, I couldn't rest. I paced my apartment, trying to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong so fast. My family's coordinated story, the manufactured evidence, Amanda's sudden doubts. It all felt too organized, too planned. I started digging through old boxes in my closet, looking for anything that might help me understand. Near the bottom of one box, I found old family photos I'd shoved away years ago. I sat on the floor and went through them. There I was at age 6, wearing a long-sleeved shirt in summer. Age 8, with a bruise on my cheek that I remembered my mother saying came from falling off my bike. Age 10, looking scared in a school photo. The memories started flooding back, memories I'd worked hard to bury. My father had been violent when I was young too. Not constantly, but enough. Enough that I'd learned to stay quiet, stay out of his way, never make him angry. My mother always had excuses. He's stressed from work. You provoked him. He's doing his best. Linda, 5 years younger than me, had been the favorite. She rarely got punished. Maybe she learned early how to please them, or maybe they just liked her better. I'd left home at 18 and never looked back. Joined the military for 4 years, then got my logistics job. I'd kept my distance from my parents, only seeing them on holidays. When Emma was born, they'd seem different, softer. Grandparent mode, I'd thought. I'd believed people could change. I'd trusted them with my daughter. I'd been so wrong. The next morning, I met with Scott again at his office. He looked grim as he laid out new documents on his desk. Your mother's lawyers filed additional affidavits yesterday. Affidavits from who? A neighbor. Mrs. Donna Fletcher. She claims she witnessed you yelling at Emma in your yard 2 weeks ago. Quote, in an aggressive and frightening manner. That's a lie. I've never yelled at Emma like that. There's also a statement from a store clerk named Martin Hughes who works at the Corner Mart on 5th Street. He says you've been coming in at unusual hours over the past few months, buying alcohol, sometimes appearing intoxicated. I shook my head. I barely drink. Maybe a beer once a week. And I've never been to that store drunk. Scott tapped his pen on the desk. The problem is, these are sworn statements. If they're lying, that's perjury. But we'd have to prove it. Something clicked in my mind. Wait. Mrs. Fletcher. That's my mother's best friend. They've known each other for 30 years. That's useful. Shows potential bias. And I need to check on this store clerk. Something doesn't feel right about that. I left Scott's office and drove straight to the Corner Mart on 5th Street. It was a small convenience store I'd been to maybe twice in my life. I went inside and asked to speak to the manager. A tired-looking man in his 40s came out from the back. I need to ask you about an employee. Martin Hughes. The manager frowned. Don't have anyone by that name working here. Are you sure? He supposedly works here. I know everyone on my staff. Nobody named Martin Hughes. Never has been. Can I get that in writing? The manager looked suspicious. Why? I explained briefly that someone was using a fake employee's name to make false statements about me in a legal case. He agreed to write a brief statement confirming no Martin Hughes worked at his store, and he signed it. Small victory. One witness proven false. Next, I drove to Mrs. Fletcher's house. She lived 3 blocks from my parents in the same neighborhood where I'd grown up. I knocked on her door, and after a moment, she opened it. She was 72, with white hair and a cardigan despite the warm weather. Brooke? Oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in years. Hi, Mrs. Fletcher. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about something important. She let me in, offered me tea, which I declined. We sat in her living room full of doilies and old furniture. Mrs. Fletcher, did my mother ask you to sign a statement about me? Her face went red. Oh well, Patricia did ask me to help with some paperwork. She said it was for family matters. Did you read what you signed? Not too carefully, I suppose. Patricia said it would help the family through a difficult time. She's my oldest friend. I trust her. I kept my voice gentle. The statement says you witnessed me yelling at my daughter in a frightening way. That's not true, is it? Mrs. Fletcher looked down at her hands. I thought it was just general character information. I didn't realize it would be used against you specifically. So you never actually saw me yell at Emma? No, dear. I haven't seen you with Emma at all in months. Would you be willing to correct your statement? Tell the truth? Her face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Brooke, but I can't get involved in this. Patricia would be so upset with me. I don't want trouble. I left her house understanding that guilt wouldn't overcome fear. She knew she'd been wrong, but she wouldn't fix it. I was driving back to my apartment when my phone rang. Scott. Brooke, where are you? Heading home. Why? Don't go home. Go somewhere else. What happened? Your apartment was broken into about an hour ago. Your landlord called the police. I made a U-turn and drove to my apartment complex. Police cars were outside. An officer stopped me as I approached my door. This your place? Yes. What happened? Break-in. Looks like they trashed one of the rooms. They let me inside. My living room was untouched. My bedroom was fine. But Emma's room looked like a tornado had hit it. Her clothes were ripped and thrown everywhere. Her toys were broken. Her books were torn. And on the wall, in black spray paint, someone had written, "Liars get hurt." I felt sick. The officer was asking me questions, but I could barely focus. This wasn't random. This was a message. My family was escalating beyond legal manipulation into outright intimidation. Any idea who might have done this? The officer asked. I couldn't tell him. If I said my family did this, it would sound paranoid. They'd probably say I staged it myself to gain sympathy. I was trapped. No, I said. I don't know. They filed a report and left. I stood in Emma's destroyed room, looking at the message on the wall. Emma couldn't come home to this. She couldn't see this. I called Amanda. For once, she answered. Can Emma stay with you tonight? Something came up and I need to deal with it. What happened? Just some apartment issues. I'll explain later. She agreed, thank God. Then I spent the next 4 hours cleaning Emma's room, repainting the wall, trying to make it look normal again. But I couldn't fix everything. Too many things were broken. The court date was in 2 days, and I was terrified. The courthouse was downtown, an old building with marble floors that echoed when you walked. I arrived early with Scott, both of us carrying folders of documentation. My hands were sweating. Amanda showed up with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. She barely looked at me. Emma was with Amanda's mother, thank God. I didn't want Emma here for this. Then my parents arrived with Linda. They had their own lawyer, a man in his 60s, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my car. That bothered me. My parents were retired, living on Social Security, and my father's small pension. How were they affording this expensive attorney? We all filed into the courtroom. The judge was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a no-nonsense expression. She reviewed the preliminary paperwork while we waited. "This is a hearing for emergency custody modification," she began. "I've reviewed the petitions from both Mrs. Patricia Brooke requesting grandparent custody and Miss Amanda Chen requesting modification of the existing custody agreement. Mr. Brooke, you're the respondent in both cases." Scott stood. "Your Honor, my client is also the victim in this situation. His daughter was assaulted by his father, and he's being falsely accused to cover up that abuse." Patricia's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have multiple witnesses and documented evidence of Mr. Brooks' instability and potential danger to the child. For the next hour, it was a nightmare." Patricia's lawyer presented the fake affidavits. The text messages between Linda and Amanda painted a picture of me as an alcoholic with anger problems who'd had a mental breakdown. He made it sound convincing. Scott presented the hospital records, Emma's statement to the doctor, the evidence that Martin Hughes didn't exist. He showed that Mrs. Fletcher was my mother's best friend and potentially biased. But against 3 family members all telling the same story, it felt like we were fighting uphill. Amanda's lawyer argued that, regardless of what happened with my parents, Emma needed stability, and Amanda could provide a calm, safe home environment while things got sorted out. Finally, the judge said, "I'd like to speak with the child privately." They brought Emma in. She looked so small and scared. The judge took her back to chambers. I wasn't allowed to go. For 20 minutes, I sat there, stomach churning, praying Emma would tell the truth, and the judge would believe her. When they returned, the judge's expression was troubled. "I've made my decision. At this time, I'm not granting emergency custody to the grandparents. However, I am modifying the existing custody arrangement as follows. Primary physical custody will temporarily shift to Miss Chen. Mr. Brooke will have supervised visitation only, 2 hours per week, at a neutral location, with a court-appointed supervisor present. There will be no contact between the child and Gerald Brooke until a full hearing can be conducted. I'm ordering psychological evaluations for all parties. Full hearing is scheduled for 30 days from today." The gavel came down. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I'd gone from having Emma half the time to 2 supervised hours per week. I'd lost. Not completely, but mostly. Emma started crying when Amanda explained she'd be staying with her full-time now. Emma reached for me, and I hugged her, trying not to cry myself. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. I'll see you soon. I want to stay with you, Daddy." I know. But it's just for a little while, I promise." Amanda took her hand and led her away. Emma looked back at me, tears streaming down her face. The sight broke something in me. I walked out of the courthouse in a daze. Scott was saying something about appealing, about the 30-day hearing, but I couldn't focus. I just lost my daughter. I was halfway to my car when a man approached me in the parking lot. He was in his 40s, wearing business casual clothes. "Brooke, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Who are you?" He pulled out a badge. "Detective Ray Coleman, Financial Crimes Division." I stared at him, confused. "Financial crimes? What does that have to do with me?" "Not you, your parents. I've been investigating Gerald and Patricia Brooke for 6 months. They're involved in a real estate fraud scheme, stealing from elderly homeowners through deceptive contracts and investment advice." My mind reeled. "What?" "Several victims have filed complaints. We've been building a case. But recently I've been watching your custody battle. And I think there's a connection." "What kind of connection?" "We believe they're setting you up as a scapegoat. They need character witnesses to testify they're good, upstanding people when this goes to trial. And they need you discredited in case you discover their crimes and try to report them." He pulled out a card and handed it to me. "Have you noticed any suspicious financial activity around your parents? Property they shouldn't be able to afford? Large purchases?" I thought about the expensive lawyer. They just hired an attorney that looks like he costs a fortune. They're retired. They shouldn't have that kind of money. Exactly. They've stolen over $200,000 from vulnerable seniors over the past 3 years. We're close to having enough for an arrest, but we need a few more pieces of evidence." He looked at me seriously. "I can't help you with the custody case directly. That's family court. Different jurisdiction. But if we can arrest your parents on fraud charges, it'll destroy their credibility. Everything they've said about you becomes suspect. How long until you can arrest them? Couple of weeks, maybe. We need to document everything perfectly so it sticks. The full custody hearing is in 30 days. I'll do what I can to speed things up. In the meantime, if you notice anything about their finances, let me know. He left me standing there in the parking lot, my head spinning. My parents weren't just abusive and manipulative, they were criminals. And they were willing to destroy me and traumatize Emma to protect themselves. I drove to the motel, where I'd been staying since the break-in. I hadn't gone back to my apartment. Couldn't afford to fix the damage yet. The motel was cheap and depressing, but it was all I could manage. I lay on the scratchy bedspread and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. The next 2 weeks were a blur of desperation and obsession. I spent every spare moment trying to dig up evidence against my parents. I started by researching property records online. Gerald and Patricia's house was paid off. Nothing suspicious there. But I found a second property listed under their names, a small vacation cabin 3 hours upstate, purchased 18 months ago for $85,000 cash. They shouldn't have had that kind of money. I also had my first supervised visit with Emma. It took place at a community center. A bland room with plastic chairs and children's books scattered on a table. The supervisor was a woman named Mrs. Helen Wright, a social worker in her 50s, who sat in the corner with a clipboard, watching everything. Emma was quiet when Amanda dropped her off. She hugged me tight but didn't say much. We colored together, read books, but the whole thing felt wrong. Artificial. We were being watched like criminals. After an hour, Emma finally spoke. "When can I come home, Daddy?" "Soon, baby. I'm working on it. Mommy says you're sick and need to get better." I closed my eyes briefly. "I'm not sick, Emma. There's just some grown-up stuff that needs to get figured out. I miss you. I miss you too. So much." Mrs. Wright checked her watch. "Time's up. 1 hour. That's all I got." When Amanda came to pick Emma up, I tried to talk to her. "Can we please talk privately for a minute?" She hesitated, then agreed. We stepped outside while Mrs. Wright stayed with Emma. "Amanda, I know you don't believe me right now, but everything I've told you is true. My father hurt Emma. My family is lying." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I want to believe you, Brooke. Part of me does. But I can't take that risk with Emma. I'm trying to prove it. I'm gathering evidence." "Evidence of what?" I told her about Detective Coleman, about the fraud investigation. Her eyes widened. "Your parents are stealing from people? That's what the detective says. And I think that's why they're doing this to me. To discredit me before it all comes out." For the first time in weeks, I saw doubt cross her face. Not doubt in me, but doubt in my parents. "I need to think about this," she said quietly. It wasn't much, but it was something. I started reaching out to some of my father's acquaintances, people from his church and his neighborhood. I pretended I was asking about estate planning services my dad had mentioned. Most people were polite but unhelpful. Then I talked to a woman named Mrs. Clarice Thompson, 81 years old, who lived 2 streets over from my parents. "Your father?" she sniffed. I wish I'd never met him. He convinced me to invest my retirement savings in some property deal, said it was guaranteed returns. I lost everything. $30,000, gone. "Did you report it to the police?" I was too embarrassed. Too ashamed. "And your father said, if I caused trouble, he'd sue me for defamation. I'm 81 years old. I can't fight legal battles. Would you be willing to talk to a detective I know? Someone who's investigating my father?" She thought about it for a long moment. "Maybe, I don't know. Can I think about it?" I gave her Detective Coleman's card. Over the next week, I found 2 more of my father's victims, both elderly women who'd lost money through his investment advice. He'd targeted vulnerable people. People who trusted him because he went to their church or knew them from the senior center. I passed all this information to Detective Coleman. He said it was helpful, but still not quite enough for an arrest. He needed documented proof, paper trails, recorded conversations. Then things got worse. Amanda called me one evening, her voice tight with anger. "Did you lose your job?" "What?" "No. Why would you think that? Linda called me today. She said you were fired 3 months ago for drinking on the job and you've been lying about it. She said that's why you can't afford a better lawyer. Amanda, I still have my job. I'm working right now. I was literally on my lunch break at the warehouse. I can prove it. I can send you my recent pay stubs. Then why would Linda say that? Because she's lying. Because my whole family is lying. But I heard the doubt creeping back into her voice. The next day at work, my supervisor Carl pulled me aside. Brooke, I need to talk to you in my office. I followed him, confused. Carl had been my boss for 3 years. We got along fine. He closed the door and looked uncomfortable. Corporate received some complaints about you. Complaints? What kind of complaints? 3 different anonymous reports in the past week. Claims that you've been coming to work intoxicated. That you've been hostile to coworkers, unreliable with your duties. Carl, none of that is true. You know me. I know. And I told them that. But corporate is taking it seriously. They're requiring a suspension pending investigation. 2 weeks. With pay. I'm sorry, Brooke. I left work in a daze. Someone had filed false complaints with my employer. Someone was systematically destroying every aspect of my life. When I got back to my motel room, there was a notice taped to my apartment door. I'd driven there to pick up some clothes. The notice was from my landlord. I was being evicted for non-payment of rent. 3 weeks overdue, but I'd paid my rent. I logged into my bank account on my phone. The checks had cleared. The money had left my account. I called my landlord, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, I paid my rent. The checks cleared from my account. I never received any payments, Brooke. I've got no record of deposits. But the money left my account. Someone must have intercepted the checks or reversed the payments somehow. That's your problem to solve. You have 30 days to vacate. I hung up and sat on the motel bed, feeling everything closing in. Lost my daughter, lost my job temporarily, losing my apartment. My parents had managed to attack me on every front simultaneously. I looked at my credit card statement, nearly maxed out from the motel and lawyer fees. My savings were gone. I had maybe $200 in cash. I was being destroyed piece by piece, and I didn't know how to stop it. The cheap motel room became my prison for the next week. I'd moved what little I could salvage from my apartment into this cramped space with stained carpet and a window that faced a brick wall. Every morning, I woke up and looked at Emma's picture on my phone, wondering if I'd ever get her back. Scott called to tell me he was withdrawing from my case. His voice was apologetic but firm. Brooke, I'm sorry. The retainer payment you gave me bounced. I can't continue without payment. It bounced? That's impossible. I verified the funds. Bank says it was reversed. Some kind of fraud investigation on your account. Another attack. Another piece of my life dismantled. Scott, please. The hearing is in 10 days. I'm sorry. I have to withdraw. You'll need to find new representation or represent yourself. He hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand. No lawyer, no money, no job, no home, and barely any access to my daughter. For the first time since this nightmare began, I thought about giving up, just disappearing, getting in my car and driving until I ran out of gas, starting over somewhere else where my family couldn't reach me. But then I'd never see Emma again. I went to the liquor store for the first time in months. Bought a bottle of cheap whiskey. Sat in my motel room and drank until the edges of everything went blurry. Everyone had accused me of being a drunk. Maybe I should just become what they said I was. Around midnight, deep into the bottle, I thought about driving my car into a concrete wall. Quick. Easy. End all of this. I passed out instead. Morning came with a vicious hangover and pounding on my door. I stumbled to answer it, head throbbing, mouth tasting like death. Amanda stood there. She looked upset. Angry. Something. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She entered the motel room, took in the empty whiskey bottle, the mess, my appearance. I probably looked exactly like the person my family claimed I was. Brooke, sit down. I sat on the edge of the bed. She pulled the desk chair over. I need to tell you something. Last night, Linda came over to my place. She was drunk. Really drunk. And she started talking. I tried to focus through the pounding in my skull. She was going on about how the plan was working, how you'd be out of the picture soon. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Amanda's hands were shaking. She said once they got custody, they could make sure Emma learned proper respect and discipline like Gerald wanted. Just like they'd raised you. The room seemed to tilt. What? I asked her what she meant. She was drunk enough that she kept talking. She said Gerald has always believed in physical discipline, that they've been working to get you out of the way because you represent a threat to their control, that once they have Emma, they can raise her their way. Oh God. The full picture was clicking into place. They want custody so they can abuse her the way they abused me. I started recording on my phone. I got some of it. She pulled out her phone and played it. Linda's slurred voice. Just needs to learn respect. Gerald knows what he's doing. Raised Brooke just fine with a firm hand. Emma's too soft, needs discipline. It wasn't a complete confession, but it was something. It was Linda admitting the violence was real, was ongoing, was intentional. Amanda, I'm so sorry I doubted you. Her eyes were filled with tears. Patricia played on all my insecurities. Made me think you were unstable, but hearing Linda talk about hurting Emma, about raising her with violence, I knew. I knew you were telling the truth all along. Thank you. My voice broke. Thank you for believing me. What do we do? I know a detective. Let me call him. I contacted Detective Coleman. He and Amanda and I met at a coffee shop an hour later. I looked terrible, still in yesterday's clothes, smelling like alcohol, but I didn't care. Coleman listened to Linda's recording. This is good, he said. But it's not enough for criminal court. She was intoxicated. It's hearsay. There's no specific admission of the fraud or a clear confession to assault, but it might help in family court. What about your fraud case? I asked. You said you were close to arresting my parents. Coleman leaned forward. I finally got the warrant for their financial records yesterday. We found everything. Forged documents, stolen funds, the whole scheme documented. We can arrest them within 48 hours. Finally, something was going right. That'll destroy their credibility in court. It should. But Brooke, there's a problem. Of course there was. What? This morning, your father filed a police report. He claims you've been stalking and harassing him and your mother. Says he has evidence of your car near their house multiple times in the past few weeks, threatening voicemails, and he's claiming you broke into their house and stole documents. I never broke into their house. I know. But he's preemptively reporting that evidence is missing before we execute our warrant. He's trying to claim you stole it, which would make it inadmissible. And there's a warrant out for your arrest right now. Stalking, harassment, burglary. The room spun. If I get arrested, I miss the custody hearing. I automatically lose Emma. You need to turn yourself in. Let me work with the DA to get the charges dropped. Trust the system. I laughed bitterly. The system has failed me at every single turn. Why would I trust it now? Amanda touched my arm. Brooke, what choice do you have? The custody hearing is in 10 days. If I turn myself in, even if the charges get dropped eventually, I might not get out in time. I might miss it. And if I miss it, the judge rules in my parents' favor by default. I looked at Coleman. How fast can you arrest my parents on the fraud charges? 48 hours, like I said. Then I have 10 days to stay free. Gather every piece of evidence I can, expose my family for what they are, and make it to that hearing. If I get arrested, Emma loses. If I turn myself in, Emma loses. The only way she wins is if I fight. Brooke, you're talking about evading arrest. That's another charge. I don't care anymore. I'm not letting my father get custody of my daughter so he can abuse her the way he abused me. Amanda stood up. Then, you're staying with me. My brother has a house across town. He's out of state for work. You can stay there. Nobody will look for you. Amanda, you'll be an accessory. I don't care either. This is my daughter too. I'm not letting them hurt her. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. The next 10 days were the most intense of my life. I stayed hidden at Amanda's brother's house while we built our case. Amanda took time off work to help. Detective Coleman bent every rule he could to feed us information. We gathered everything. Coleman's fraud evidence showing Gerald and Patricia had stolen $217,000 from 8 elderly victims. Mrs. Thompson, Fletcher, and 3 other victims agreed to give statements. Linda's recorded admission, slurred as it was, admitting the family's violence and plans. Documentation proving Martin Hughes didn't exist and that the store clerk affidavit was completely fabricated. My childhood medical records, which Amanda helped me obtain, showing a pattern of injuries consistent with abuse from ages 5 through 17. We built a timeline showing how my family had systematically coordinated their story, manufactured evidence, and targeted every aspect of my life to discredit me. Phone records showing dozens of calls between Patricia, Linda, and the fake witnesses before their affidavits were filed. Bank records Coleman obtained, showing the money used to pay their expensive lawyer came from the fraud scheme. On day 8, Detective Coleman arrested Gerald and Patricia. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, theft from vulnerable adults, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy. The local news covered it. Elderly couple arrested in real estate fraud scheme, victimizing seniors in their own community. Linda, terrified she'd be charged too, gave a full statement to police. She admitted everything. The custody case was fabricated to protect their reputation and keep me quiet about their crimes. The witness statements were lies she'd helped coordinate. The break-in at my apartment was Gerald, sending a warning. She signed an affidavit recanting all her previous statements about me. The next morning, I turned myself in on the stalking charges. With Coleman's testimony, Amanda's support, and our new lawyer Jared, a young attorney who'd agreed to take my case pro bono after hearing about it from Coleman, the charges were dropped within hours. The judge reviewing the arrest warrant saw through the obvious attempt at witness intimidation and obstruction. The custody hearing happened 2 days later. This time, everything was different. Scott had agreed to come back on as my attorney, waiving his fees after seeing the news about my parents' arrest. We walked into the courtroom with boxes of evidence. Amanda sat beside me, her hand in mine, united. My parents weren't there. They were in jail. Bail denied due to flight risk. Linda wasn't there either. She'd moved out of state, too ashamed to face anyone. The hearing took 3 hours. We presented everything: the medical evidence of Emma's injuries and my childhood abuse, Linda's confession and recorded statements, the proof of witness fabrication, the fraud charges, and how they connected to the custody manipulation, Emma's original statement to the hospital, Amanda's testimony that she'd been manipulated but now fully supported me. Emma's guardian ad litem, the attorney appointed to represent her interests, gave a powerful statement recommending full custody return to me. She said Emma had been clear and consistent that she wanted to live with her father, that she was afraid of her grandfather, and that all evidence supported that I was a loving, protective parent who'd been systematically victimized by my own family. The judge didn't even need to deliberate. She ruled from the bench. I want to start by saying this is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered in 20 years on the bench. Mr. Brooke, you have been subjected to a coordinated campaign of defamation, manipulation, and abuse by the very people who should have protected you. Your parents exploited the family court system to further their criminal enterprises and endanger your child. She looked at the papers in front of her. I am hereby dissolving the emergency custody modification. Full custody is restored to Mr. Brooke and Miss Chen under their original agreement. I am issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting Gerald, Patricia, and Linda Brooke from any contact with the minor child. If either grandparent is released from custody at any point, they are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of this child. The gavel came down. This case is closed. Mr. Brooke, I apologize that this system failed you initially. You showed remarkable courage in protecting your daughter. Amanda and I both started crying. Scott shook my hand. Jared hugged me. They brought Emma in. She'd been waiting with a social worker. The moment she saw me, she ran. I caught her and picked her up, holding her tight while she wrapped her arms and legs around me like she'd never let go. I get to come home? She asked, her voice muffled against my neck. Yeah, baby, you get to come home. Amanda hugged both of us, and for a moment we were a family again, just in a different configuration. The next 6 months were about healing. I got my job back with a formal apology from corporate and compensation for the suspension. They'd investigated and found the complaints against me were from fake email addresses, all traced back to Linda. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, felt terrible when he learned what had happened and let me out of the eviction, even helping me deal with the bank to recover my stolen rent payments. Gerald and Patricia were both sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge called their crimes particularly heinous because they'd targeted vulnerable seniors who trusted them. Linda took a plea deal for her cooperation, 2 years probation and community service. Amanda and I rebuilt our co-parenting relationship on a foundation of trust and communication. We were better together as partners in raising Emma than we'd ever been as a married couple. Her parents even apologized to me, admitted they'd been wrong about me. Emma started therapy to process the trauma. She had nightmares for a while, but slowly got better. Her therapist said kids are resilient, especially when they have supportive parents who believe them and protect them. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after everything ended, I took Emma to the park near our apartment. She was on the swings, pumping her legs, her laughter carrying across the playground. The welts were long-healed. The fear in her eyes was gradually fading. I sat on a bench and watched her, thinking about everything we'd survived. I'd learned some hard truths. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most. Sometimes, standing up for what's right means standing completely alone. The system meant to help can fail, can be manipulated, can turn against you, but you keep fighting anyway. Family isn't just blood. Linda was blood, and she helped nearly destroy us. But Detective Coleman, Scott, Jared, Amanda, people who owed me nothing, they became family when it mattered. They believed in truth and justice enough to risk themselves for us. Most importantly, I learned that children must be protected at all costs. Emma's voice, her truth, her safety, those were worth more than anything. Every moment I'd wanted to give up, every time I'd felt the weight crushing me, I'd looked at her picture and found the strength to keep going. She was safe now. That's what mattered. Emma jumped off the swing at its highest point and landed in the sand, then ran over to me, grinning. "Did you see how high I went?" "I did. You were flying." "I wasn't scared at all." "You're very brave." She climbed up next to me on the bench and leaned against my side. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." We sat there together, father and daughter, survivors of something terrible, beginning something better. The afternoon sun was warm. Her hand was small in mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuine peace. Because I'd fought for her. I'd never stopped fighting. And in the end, that made all the difference. If you've experienced anything similar to what I went through, standing up to family abuse or protecting someone you love against all odds, I'd like to know, what gave you the strength to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless? Please share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this story moved you or made you think about the importance of protecting children and believing their voices, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real struggles and triumphs. And share this with anyone who needs to hear that even when the whole world seems against you, the truth has power and justice is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. To anyone out there facing their own battle, fighting for someone they love, remember this: your voice matters, your fight matters, and you're stronger than you know. Don't ever stop protecting the people who need you. Never give up, they're worth it.